She has a large bag. You'll help Leah?
Cool.
Load and ride over to 3A and
Thank you.
back. Yes.
Yeah, there's space for a second. There's space for another if anybody else wants to go too.
When we finish, I'll have to join your leave.
Okay, fine. then.
I mean, okay, if you want to do it today. What time is it?
Are you seeing that training? Your leg. My ankle is okay today. A lot of my growth, so. I'm sorry that happened. Yeah,
Oh, it's okay.
I'm glad you're recovering.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm recovering too.
Why don't you do the check-in now, Ginny? Oh, just like walk around and ask everyone. She's gonna check them.
Yeah, that was nice.
Oh, Leah, maybe. Leah, I don't think there's more. Like, I don't think it's enough for him.
Okay.
Do you have any?
No, I don't have a.
No, I don't like the electric
Diffuser.
but I'm not.
Also has two, maybe two spare one.
Yeah, that's
Do we have any extra blankets now?
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I'm volunteering here, but.
Yeah, I mean, I did go through that whole testing.
Yeah.
And found out, yes, I'm sure it doesn't kick in very often, but it did kick in a few.
Oh, I'm so excited. I want to put it on restorative.
So it's trying to have a blanket. So after the 3 weeks of the week, I've been like a lot more. I like kind of like work things.
Okay,
I
good.
realized that I've done them too long, but it's full time, and I'm like, I don't know.
I don't feel like that. We go out, I just feel like everyone has a million things to do. And I have time. Here, I have so many things to do, I'm like, honestly.
It's just hard to like reaching out and it's like it's not me.
Well, those were the cameras. It was posted today, but I was like, still worried about it.
And sometimes it's like post it, I feel better.
Totally, I get that. It's like therapy a little bit, like I just need to get back.
Like
Yeah, I think it's really hard.
And I remember when you were like behind me a couple weeks or a couple months, and I like needed to know like it's not always. I mean, it is going like this, but it's like at this thing.
Yeah,
And like
generally upward.
right, but like
Oh,
it's just
like-
like a little down and like that's I don't want to like to be
I know, I have noticed that too.
yeah. As soon as this feels pretty great. It's really hard. Last week was like, on Friday, I basically stayed in bed.
Who do you think you are?
And I like went to PT, and my PT was like, it was a little early. And I was like, yeah, a little early. But today's been good. I took 2 days. Yesterday, I barely moved. Friday, I barely moved. And then today, it was like, what's fine? What are you talking about? I think like it will adapt. It's just
Getting stronger, it's good to use it. You're not gonna like break and break it or anything. You're just strengthening and it's like saying, okay, it's not that bad, but we'll get there.
So it's actually good for you. It's just that
Right.
and like most people, they don't like they're not gonna do it. So it's like you're gonna be faster. Like, but it's just
Yeah, I didn't do more.
like saying like because of what I do, just walking around, like people in the like quadruple hours. Like if I went to
Oh, is that what you were
my muscles are already shortened, they're already
No.
weaker, and I asked them to do the same thing. She decided to
Turned it into
and so 2 hours like walking around the river is already like and so then like you're walking around there. It's like so
I can't remember. Question.
yeah.
But breathing.
I've never dealt with it. Yes. And like this kind of like this is doing hard. I know it's like
Or it is totally.
right now. For later, it's great.
I have copies from, I'm not sure if they're my mentor though.
Right.
Working on yeah. Dealing with that. Oh, it's sexy now.
Good job, still. I mean, I know it's kind of like working at well, no, I know it's gonna be next week, but I don't know anything like if I have.
Okay, what did you get to for this last
Or they're just gonna be like, I have said this will be package, so that's nice, but I don't know how long. And so I've just been trying to like think about all the things that I wanna do and start putting it into motion because I wanna roll things out in Monday and have like,
I think that.
you know, Facebook. Private side now, I'm trying to like figure that out.
Yeah, it's okay.
To make sure we're good for that.
I talked to one.
Do you guys focus on?
Part of it I don't follow.
He's been posting every day for Black History Month, and he's posting just so awesome.
Really?
A different person all over the world for Black History Month. All these yogis.
Yoga with Thai,
Yeah,
TAI.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so every day.
Then the Friday. And so I went in and did that one. Okay.
It's interesting, I've seen this photo. I've seen that photo before and I don't know where but it's interesting.
I get your box. Okay. Yeah, so just like, we were talking with Michael and getting our life on track in terms of like everything, agreements and like specific. Okay. That's so very kind of, oh, let's just do this, let's do this, and like, I'm like, this is all of my passion. Like, I can't just donate things.
Yeah.
So that was good this week as we cleared that up and
Good. So you got things.
yeah, and then we're moving forward and see how it goes. I'm happy to have like a dedicated space to do private, so that's definitely one thing there.
So you're saying, like, I think that like all this, the next couple months, it's like you're still like on the right path. Like it's like
Yeah, building things, it feels like that, and just be like, okay, now what? You know, it's kind of like, okay, I've done all the prep, and now it just needs to actually work out.
really, it's also like what you're building is like really doing. So it's not like you're even if it doesn't like finish the next couple months. Like the end thing is like
Yeah, it also feels like building credibility, it's kind of like expanding my network, and like, so until like, even if these things will actually work out, it's like all progressing to this level, and it feels better than when I went to New Orleans where I was just like, see what happens. Now it's like, oh no, I know how I actually have to do this, but it's not just teaching 100 yoga classes. Like, that's not how it works.
and like also if that was the worst thing that happens, then like you could do it.
Right.
Like that's your
Exactly, that's what it's yeah. I could do workshops on training, so it's not like I'll just doing that. And then of course, not like I can never do any other videos, like it could be part-time projects. That would be nicer to me if I had like in the corporate world, like it's 3 months.
yeah, but I don't think you should do full-time anymore.
I just would like it to be like, this is a project you're working on, it has an end date, you know.
I know anyone that does like gigs in the corporate world that like are 3 to 6 and I think about it.
Well, I want to see what the control is like, and then I'm going to try, I'm not going to ride that out. So
Just really like
down
that that might be like a person that you connect you with, like should down the road be a thing that you're just So I had to drop out because my work was not able to handle and people like when we do she's not at a doctor and pushing me. Like it was like I was just I'm a lot further along now than I was at the time. Their stories and I was like, oh, this is too much.
I mean, I have to deal with my stories
Just right now. Kind of forms teachers like she has favorites, which I guess is fine. I clearly wasn't because I was like so the board that it was clear to me that like I wasn't connecting with her. And I was like, I'd like to have this good connection, but this is not the right time. This is connection because she's like concerned about me more than she's about the students. Like it just wasn't right. I mean, it's just I already know the material, so like it's not really helpful to be here.
more review.
It's more about making the connection and like figuring an assistant for. And so this doesn't feel like the right thing. I'm gonna take her therapeutics course because I haven't done that one. That was the one that you helped with at the end of the year, and I feel like that's a better connection. And it's
I'm gonna go to a therapeutics module in Maryland if you want to go in like June. I'll let you know the date.
Yeah.
She's doing 4 modules, so she's like 3 days long.
Jillian?
Not Jillian, my therapy teacher.
And she's really good.
She's excellent. She's like an exercise science, person, so she's very on the anatomical side, but she's been teaching yoga for like 20 years, so it's like just like second nature to her. Yeah, it looks like a little yoga.
So if you did so you can.
I love that.
Yes. I'm going to see what my teacher training is for her. Hopefully it's not conflicting. And I get PTO paid time. I take time off. 3 months from now.
Well,
Just
I
some.
could probably do it.
All right, well, let's get started. Whoever has not checked in with Janine on your homework, please do that before the end of today. But let's get ready now to start our restorative piece, the best yoga there is. Exactly what we need after 2 days of Ashtanga practice. Get back to the relaxation. Who did not meet Sierra the last time she came?
2 people.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you guys introduce yourself to me and just let me know if you have a restorative practice or no, and if no, why not? And if me, I don't like it, no pressure.
Maya. I don't really have a restorative practice. I mean, I do certain poses that I would probably consider restorative, but I don't think I've ever been to like specifically like a restorative class.
Totally okay.
My name is Mila.
Yeah.
I don't have a restorative practice. Home restorative practice, sometimes I like to do, like, when I go to that, I like to do a body scan before I go to sleep.
Amazing. Awesome. Great.
Do you know that?
Oh, yes.
And just so everyone knows, Vata and Pitta restorative is so good for you.
Does anyone have any questions before we get started with this little module about the nervous system presentation? Please make any questions.
So we had a homework question about it, and so when I looked at my notes and when I Googled, I found some more information about, I can't remember the words, other parts of the nervous system. I mean, just that like the brain and the spine is considered parts of the nervous system, and then there's some question about like digestion being either part of the parasympathetic or there's some other word like
Enteric.
enteric.
Yeah, so that I chose not to go into just because I don't know a lot about the digestive portion of it, but that is part of it. There's 3 different kinds. There's sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric. And enteric is the digestive side. So yes, that exists. I just didn't bring it in for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, focus on the parasympathetic and the sympathetic pieces. Those are more what we like reference when we're teaching.
Yeah. So what is restorative yoga? Does anyone have just like a definition they want to share?
Or a guess?
You can just shout it out if you want.
Maybe a practice that kind of allows the body to restore itself.
Yeah.
Or rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation. Okay. Anything else?
Passive poses.
Passive poses. Yes.
It's a lot of support.
Love what?
It's a lot of support for the body so that it can really like soften into the cracks.
Yes. All of those are correct. I'm going to give you a very technical definition that I stole from a mentor named Jillian Pansky. So this is not my wording, but I couldn't have worded it better. So restorative yoga creates conditions to release unnecessary habitual tension and balance the nervous system. I'll say it again, and we'll also send you notes, so it's okay if you don't get all of it. Restorative yoga creates conditions to release unnecessary habitual tension and balance the nervous system. the like short answer is it reintegrates the body and the mind. Another way to say it is that this is a form of conscious relaxation or remembered wellness. So a lot of people, when they walk into a restorative class, and I think there were a couple people in this room who thought this as well, is that when they walk into restorative, they're taking a stretch class. That's like really common. So what I said in the definition was that we're creating conditions to release unnecessary habitual tension, but I didn't say we're stretching. What's the difference between a stretch and a release?
And not pulling muscles.
Not just muscles, okay.
Putting effort into it.
Putting effort into it. So stretching is more effortful, more active. Yes, so stretching builds heat. Stretching creates tension, it is active. So you may have that feeling when you stretch of like, it's called improved felt elasticity. So like stretching, it's like you stretch a rubber band, it bounces back to its original shape, but it like feels good. What's actually happening is your brain is saying, okay, I have control over this muscle, so I'm gonna let you stretch it. So when you feel tight, your brain is saying, oh, I don't have enough control, I'm gonna keep you in a shortened position. When your brain feels like it has more control or increased muscle control, it'll let you stretch further, right? So that's why your end range will increase over time if you like continue stretching. Your body gets more comfortable with going to a deeper range of motion. But again, all of that is active. So flexibility classes, classes where you're intentionally stretching is fantastic. We should all do them, but that's not what restorative yoga is about. So releasing is letting a body part or your body in general, it's less about creating something and more about allowing tension to move through your body. So instead of having muscle control to like increase range of motion, it's about allowing tension to just move. So it's kind of about getting out of the way a little bit. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, I talked about this before in the nervous system talk, but restorative yoga is really about tuning into subtlety and allowing for self-study.
What's another word for self-study?
Swadhyaya.
And again, allowing or empowering students to feel their own shifts. So some of this as a teacher is you getting out of the way of the student. So we talked about this before, conscious relaxation. 3 things must be present. Does anyone remember what they were? It's okay if you don't.
The body.
So the first one is relaxing the body.
Relaxing the breath.
Yeah, regulating the breath or relaxing the breath. And then what's the third one?
Relaxing the mind.
Quieting the mind. Yeah. So relaxing the body, regulating the breath, quieting the mind. And there's a specific order to that. So for relaxing the body, rest is a prerequisite for health. So in order to heal, you have to rest. In order to health, you have to be able to heal. So rest and health, you have to rest in order to be healthy. Okay.
the idea with relaxing the body is having your body habitually relax. So what I mean by that is the body follows the mind follows the body. If your body is not used to relaxing, or your mind is not used to relaxing, it's not going to happen. So I'll give like a physical example. On Friday, because I am dealing with an ankle injury, I had what they call is a pain attack. So like my muscles were overworked. And so I was in physical pain. And because I was in physical pain, I started to get really angry about it. I was like frustrated that like I'm at the point where I'm at, or all the things that you get down on yourself about, right? Because I was like angry, I was like tensing up. I was like, my heart rate was increasing. My muscles started to tense even more. And then I started to get more angry. And it became this cycle, right? My body was tense, I was frustrated. My body was tense, I was frustrated. It was like the body and the mind going in this cycle. So yesterday, on Saturday, I had a similar pain attack. And I was like, all right, I'm angry. I'm gonna be angry. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to relax my body to break the cycle. So I put my feet up the wall into a restorative pose. I put on some music, I used some essential oil, and I just focused on breathing. And I relaxed my body, and I didn't intentionally stop being angry, but like I broke that habit of like the mind-body thing. And so that was like a very physical example of like calming my body to help relax my mind, right? And using breath to do so. It was restorative. And I think that by relaxing the body, you're breaking a tension cycle habit. Our bodies love to get into habits. It's really efficient for the body to do that. It's really natural. So creating good habits or habits of tension release is really important. The other thing I want to say here is that humans seek familiarity. So even if a habit isn't good for us or doesn't feel good, we're going to seek it out. We're going to do it because it's habit, because it feels familiar. So that's like a little insight into why like people eat things that aren't necessarily good for us or get into relationships that aren't good for us, is because it feels familiar. Like even feeling bad can feel familiar, and we build the habit around that. So by changing our body, by like creating a less tense body and creating a habit around that, creating familiarity around that, you're starting a new habit, which is good, right? So when you're teaching restorative yoga, when you're putting your student into a pose, you want as little or no muscular effort. That's the goal of every pose. Because we're in the business of creating the conditions for our students to release tension and break habits, mind-body habits. So like the practical application of this is that you use poses that are passive, so don't require muscular effort, and that are supported with props. I like to think of it as you bring the floor up to your student. You don't have the student meet the floor. So the floor is flat, our bodies are not, right? Even if you lay down on the floor, you still have curves in your spine, you have space underneath your knees, space behind your ankle. So the idea is that you're using props to create the floor underneath the student, okay? And then they can relax habitual tension. The other thing I'll say is that when you are trying to release tension from the body, the less movement, the better. Sometimes like gentle movement or like rocking movements can be really helpful, but I like to operate with less is more. So less movements, fewer poses. I don't usually do more than like 4 or 5 poses a class because it takes time to let the body settle into the poses. So in like a regular asana class, we're doing like, I don't know, 40 poses or something. You're doing a ton of poses. Restorative is completely different. And I also would say that you want to use props wisely, right? So you don't want to be like, okay, 3 bolsters for pose 1, and then take all the bolsters away, 8 blocks for prop 2. Okay, take all those away. Because all that time in between when you're sitting up and moving everything around, the body like kind of wakes up a little bit. So you want to keep it really simple. So the next step along the way is regulating the breath. I'm going to talk about the breath a lot more in a couple weeks, but the purpose of restorative is to create free-flowing breath. So why this matters, when you breathe, and I'll go over like how, have you gone over how we breathe?
Yeah, I don't remember the respiratory system, but.
Okay, so you guys know what the diaphragm is? Okay, so when you breathe, you're using your diaphragm. The diaphragm stimulates something called the vagus nerve. Have you talked about the vagus nerve? No, okay, perfect. The vagus nerve, it's called
VAGUS.
VAG, yeah, like,
Not Las Vegas.
yeah. Yes. I think it's because it's vagabond, like I think that's what it's, because it's like a wandering nerve. It's the longest nerve in your body. It goes from your skull or your head all the way down to, I believe, like your pelvic region. It's called cranial nerve 10, but it's like cranial Roman numeral 10, which is an X. So when you breathe, your diaphragm stimulates the vagus nerve. There's like a physical, and I'll bring a, I'll show you what it looks like. The diaphragm actually like touches the nerve, so it stimulates the nerve. The vagus nerve does a lot of things, and a lot of things that if you research it, you're going to find that I'm not going to talk about. But the things that I am going to talk about that it does, it lowers the heart rate, lowers blood pressure, decreases alertness, increases sexual arousal, and stimulates contractions in the stomach for digestion. What do all those things sound like to you?
They're great things.
They're great things, definitely things you want. Parasympathetic nervous system responses. So breathing physically stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is responsible for parasympathetic nervous system responses. So it's not like magic that you relax. I mean, a little bit of it's magic. I like magic. I like magic. But like, it is a physical thing that you are doing when you are breathing. So when you are walking around a class and you're like, how does my student look? Should I give an adjustment? Do I need to like offer them something special? I look around and I look at bodies and I say, okay, I'm looking for the body to be propped in the most optimal position for breath, for free flowing breath. And when I change the position of a student, it's for more optimal breath. So I'm looking for like full body breathing, not just chest breathing, not just belly breathing. The whole torso like lights up and expands and contracts. Something I want to point out with the breath, if you feel stuck, like if someone looks like they're breathing is restricted or not as like vibrant as it could be, cueing the breath is a really good tool. Like cueing how to breathe, because sometimes people have habitual tension. They can't relax the breath just through a pose. They actually need like the verbal cue to release. Some people are really physical, really tactile. Some people, they need to hear it to do it. So the last part of this, the quieting the mind, the student drives this portion. It's like pretty hands-off for you as a teacher. Your job is really about setting the conditions. It's less about making something happen here. And it won't always happen. Like the student may not be able to calm down or quiet because of wherever they are in their life that day in that moment. So ideally what's gonna happen is when you calm the body, you like regulate the breath, what happens is the student is free from distraction. So things more subtle start to bubble up, right? Sometimes that's great, and you can sit there and as a student you can process it and allow it to bubble up and then like drift off, depending on what it is. And sometimes that feeling is like really, really intense. So that's why you'll get people in class who might cry, or people who might leave, or people who just like will disassociate and be bored, right? You'll get all these things in a restorative class, and it's less about you as the teacher and more about whatever's going on with that student. And so it has to do with how familiar that student is with sensation or with whatever is coming up. If it's something that they can sit with, if they're familiar with sitting with it, they'll usually be fine. If they're not, it'll trigger a reaction and they'll react as such. So the idea here is that you want the student to become familiar with letting things bubble up and move out of the way. Bubble up and move out of the way. We call this the practice of catch and redirect. Catch and release. Catch, redirect, catch, release. And again, it's because of the familiarity for the student in this type of sensation, it can either be anxiety producing or create like an anti-anxiety effect. So just know that. And as we practice, you may feel that, and all that's fine. As the teacher, you're creating the container for this to happen. That's your role, so that whatever comes up, they have a container. They have a place to do it, and they're practicing familiarity with that. But a lot of different flavors are going to come up. A lot of different things are just going to come up. And a lot of it is really dependent upon how safe the student feels. So some things that you can do, like practically in a class, is you can ask the student to identify tension areas, so to do a body scan. Take it back to the physical level, so they're focusing on their body and can focus on just releasing tension. You can have the student go through that catch and release, catch and redirect. So cue them through allowing whatever it is to bubble up, using a visualization, and then to kind of bubble out. You can also ask the student how they're meeting their own tension so they can identify it themselves. In a big class, like in a public class, I keep things very vague so that it kind of can encompass everyone. If it's a private, specific, especially as I get to know the student really well. So that's really like the formula for creating a class. Calming the body, the breath, regulating the breath and quieting the mind. Some other just kind of like general things. Minimum of 20 minutes. It takes about 20 minutes for the body to like fully relax. Relaxation is progressive. So it's common the first 5 to 10 minutes, you see a lot of shifting, a lot of nervous energy. But by about 15, 20 minutes, you're gonna feel the energy relax in the room. So if you're teaching a class where you feel like you need to have movement, do movement at the beginning, first 5 to 10 minutes. Even if it's just like cat-cow, but like you don't wanna come out of it, move people around, and then have them quiet. You wanna go from most movement to least movement. You also wanna go from like most complicated to least complicated. Right? Because as the person gets more, or as the students get more and more relaxed, they become less present with, like, they come out of like their thinking body, their thinking mind. The other thing too is that frequency affects reaction. So a more seasoned student, so someone who's more familiar with restorative, will be more relaxed faster. It takes someone who's really new, it takes them longer to relax. So the more you do it, you reestablish the relaxation response more quickly. In terms of the space, you want to think of the word soothing in the space. So if you were like in the perfect space where you could create every condition, the space should be like dimly lit, just right, warm-ish temperature. You want everything to be really soft. We also like work in imperfect conditions. So I would say like whatever you have control over in the room, you want it to be as soothing. Like always choose the thing that's the most soothing. And then the last thing that I'll say is, and this can be really hard, especially for people who like trend towards being a vinyasa teacher, leave your student be. That's like really hard for a lot of teachers. Because as teachers, we're so used to being on, like inhale, do this, exhale, do that, like walking around the room and adjusting every single thing that we see. But restorative is about the student. So you're creating the container and you're letting the student do their thing. So it's really about being hands-off and being present with whatever comes up in the room, which is like a more subtle thing, right? But at the same time, like you can't tune out, right? You don't want this, like the student can see if you've checked out, right? So it's kind of a practice in like being present but not doing something yourself. Questions about like a general restorative class?
Do you play music?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you play music? Oh,
I do play music. I think music is really soothing, and I think that music also sets the tone of the room. I've done it a couple times without music, usually because like the music wasn't working, like it was like broken, and it is possible. I've also had teachers sing, and that's really lovely. My voice is not lovely, so I don't sing, but like that is a really wonderful option if you do have a singing voice, if you sing something soothing. Or playing an instrument too, like live music is really, really wonderful. Maybe not drums, maybe like something soothing. Drums can be soothing, but you know.
Is there a peak pose or anything you
work towards?
So, yeah, so I'm gonna give you homework with this. Not today, but I'll email you. I like to, and then Judith Hanson Lassiter, I've never taken from her, but I've like read a bunch of her books. She says the goal is to move the spine in all the different directions. So I usually do some type of forward bend, some type of back bend, some type of twist. So it's less about like that arc and more about just like a well-rounded thing. With that said, if I'm doing it, like if I teach like a vinyasa and then a restorative, and in my vinyasa I focused on back bends, I'll probably do more forward bending. Or if I'm working with a private client and they have something specific going on, then I'll tailor it. But generally, you want to move the spine in all directions. Other questions? Yes.
Because you talked about some ways to address the students like have things sort of bubbling up or kind of have an experience going on during the class. Is there a way to tell if you're, observing your students and everyone is in the pose? Can you kind of tell what people are experiencing from looking at them, or?
I can tell when something is going on. Like I'm at the point now where I can tell if it's like general kind of like just someone's kind of shifty, because like you get people who like, sometimes people get comfortable by being shifty, and I can usually tell like just a shifty person versus someone who's like, oh, I really can't get comfortable type of thing. And I can usually tell physical uncomfortableness versus emotional uncomfortableness. It like takes some time though to like figure those things out. And I really don't know what's going on. Like you just never know what's happening unless someone's told you. And so I really kind of like, I spend most of the time observing that student. If someone's crying, I'll usually go over and I'll like give them a tissue, or I'll put my hand on their back or something so that they know that I'm there, like I'm acknowledging that something has come up. But I don't, if a student leaves the room, I won't follow them out like I usually, unless like, again, I know what's going on, because this is for them. What are your thoughts about that?
So there's varying degrees. You can kind of gauge if someone's having something like a reaction that is necessary for you to intervene. That's like, if someone is having a severe reaction, you'll know in your class. It's not going to be like, oh, you need time to figure that out, right? It's all, but it's like you discern more and more the more you teach, and you can tell like, oh, this person is just kind of like a jittery person, so that their restorative practice is going to look like that the whole time. Like when I teach my mom, I know that's how she's going to be. And then the other thing is, if you have them if they have set themselves up properly, they'll be more likely to be able to relax. And a lot of people don't get the point that you have to be very specific about how you set your posture up, right? If I say put a bolster down and lay on it, but then the bolster is too thick and you can't relax, like it's you have to go and actually say to people like, oh, this doesn't look like it works for you. Let me show you a different way. Or, really, really use the blankets to support your arms if the floor is too far. Like people will just be like, oh, it's fine. I'm not going to make a big deal, right? But the point is to like really set yourself up and really make yourself comfortable. Like all the little tiny annoying things that are going to help you to be comfortable. And you need to like teach people that and tell them it's okay and give them permission, because a lot of people come from a place of like, oh, I'm fine the way I am. It's just, I don't need that. It's fine. I don't want to make a big deal. Like they don't want to be bothersome or something. So there's varieties, and so you'll learn that. Like if it's a person who's just really not set up properly, or if it's someone who's having like an emotional distress because of something coming up for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example of like, if someone is in the habit of not being comfortable, of not releasing tension,
Yeah.
they're not going to go to your class and magically all of a sudden release tension. Like they have to teach themselves how to make that a habit of like going through their body and saying, okay, like, am I like holding my shoulders, or am I like, can I release my shoulders? Like that is, I think that like we're in a unique group because like we all want to be yoga teachers. We all have a practice of some sort. Like we all are like in tune with our bodies, but like the general public are not, right? Like they're either in their head more, or they're just not acquainted with like, they don't even know like what tension feels like because they're so used to it. That's what I mean about like building habits that may not be great for us. It's not like, oh yeah, I like no cigarettes aren't great, but I'm gonna do it anyway, I'm addicted. It's like sometimes people think that like this is all they've got. They can't do this because they're so used to this. The other thing that I would say about props too, if you have someone that is not able to release, the props matter. Like a bolster versus a blanket versus a block feels very different. And I always teach a class that I want to take. That's like a great rule of thumb, like teach the class that you want to take. But like we're also all really different. So like sometimes you get someone into a pose and you're like, that is not the right thing for this person right now. And so you have additional props usually, although restorative can be done with minimal propping. And when you have minimal props, your voice becomes a really important tool. Because if you can't bring the floor up to the student because you only have one blanket and that's all you have, then you verbally cueing how to release tension becomes more important. So in a regular yoga studio, that's probably not as big of a thing, like because you'll have all the props. And with a private, you might have like all the props. You might have like 15 blankets. But if you're teaching like in a residential building, or if you're teaching in a homeless shelter, or you're teaching somewhere that's not like the ideal conditions, you'll need to cue a lot of this stuff.
And because you're really trying to lead someone to a place of restoration and release, you have to use like everything possible, which is like why we start with just like the room setup has to be like really on point, like the lighting, the sounds, the scents, just the orientation. So I told you all to clean the room up before we started this, because it's really difficult to just, I mean, for me it is, if there's like tons of clutter around, it's hard for me to relax, right? And so it's also not just the words you choose, but the way you say them, right? The tone of your voice, the volume, the speed, right? If you're using music, then it's like you have to choose really specific music. Like she said, like you don't really want to pick stuff with like a ton of percussion, because when you're trying to lay down and relax, if someone's playing the drums, like you never really relax. So you have to think you have to be really intentional with everything, and then with yourself, of course. Like when you're about to say things, you know, you have to like prime yourself and get yourself prepared to lead people, because if you're all nervous and anxious and then you try to help someone relax, it's not really
Yeah, the students will take their cues from you, right? So like, I think we talked about this before, but like if you walk in and you are amped, that is going to transfer to your students. So it is really important, if you're going through something, that you, I wouldn't even say put it aside, but that you like acknowledge it and move through it.
or use it.
Or use it. Questions?
Back to music.
Yeah.
Are you taking a risk if you play music that has words in it? Because is that
almost like planting seeds? What if someone's trying to relax and you play a song that is a little sad, and I don't know, maybe reminding them.
The music that I'm going to play for our restorative practice will have words. Let me know what you think. I think that, okay, so like I'm going to say this and this could like I don't mean this like intensely, but it's like you could always offend someone. You could because we don't know who's in our class, we don't know what they've been through. What I would say is that the intention that you bring is really important. So if you're coming into class and these are your favorite songs and you love them and they feel like the right setting for what you're doing, it's very rare that someone is going to be offended or something. I had a situation where I did play a song that was a song that was like on the playlist of a woman whose father died, and that was like a playlist that he gave her. So stuff like that happens all the time. But like sometimes triggers happen and they're not necessarily bad. I think again, like with your intention, it's important. With your intention matters. Yeah.
For me, for restorative, like if I use music with words, it's either like in the beginning of the class or the end of the class when I'm like bringing them before they're really relaxed or when I'm bringing them out of relaxation. If I want to use words in the middle of the class, then I try to choose something that's sort of like a mantra or something like really gentle. I don't think it's like don't use anything with words, but just be mindful of like how you're creating the journey for them. Because if it's all like instrumentals and then halfway through the class when everyone is like way relaxed, someone starts singing, you could all of a sudden bring someone out of their relaxed state, right? So it's just kind of like how you construct the playlist. I don't think you have to like never use words, but think about using them in the right time of the class.
I mean, I had a question that's similar to, to me, is that sort of when things bubble up, but I mean, it sounds like that's pretty desirable to have things bubble up and people, leave stuff in class.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, like, as a teacher, how comfortable you are with people having stuff bubble up. Like, there's a fantastic teacher that teaches at 3 Jules named Yuval. And Yuval, I think, has a unique gift in that he can let things come up in the room that are very intense. He handles them in that they stay in the room, they like are intense in that moment. And then like it bubbles off and people leave and it's like this just beautiful thing that was in the room. It was like this beautiful moment. I've seen other teachers who are less comfortable with that, probably because in their own lives they're less comfortable with intense feelings coming up. And so when they see it come up, sometimes I'll see teachers kind of shut it down. I'm more on the side of Yuval, where like if it comes up, yeah, let it come up. I mean, we're teaching adults, right? So we all know, like I never had something happen that like I really needed to intervene. Usually if something big comes up, is that someone like leaves the room because they have to like go take care of something themselves, right? Like leaving the room crying or something like that. So it's really about you as a teacher, like letting it come up and be in the room and disperse. I mean, that's, when I think about my own emotions, my own experience, bottling up or bottling down doesn't work for me, because then it just like, I think that like having a healthy allowance of like just kind of like moving and releasing and moving and releasing has been the most effective for me. So I create classes that allow for that in the room. Does that help?
Yeah, and it just makes me aware that like as far as these spaces, these are shared spaces.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what else is in the studio when we're not here, and then when we leave here, we don't know, if all this stuff is coming up, and we don't know, like a bunch of kids are coming in or something like that, and just sort of like the responsibility of like, like the whole arranging the space and purifying the space beforehand and even after also.
So
it's either
So there's ways that you can clear the room. And that would be a ritual that you would come up with to clear the room. After every class that I teach, I always wash my hands with cold water. That's a way of me kind of taking in and everything energetically that comes into my body, I wash it away with cold room. Whatever was in the room is left. Do you do anything?
Yeah, I mean, like when I'm giving, like when we're doing shavasana at this and we're going to each person, I always try to like wipe it off and like shake it out between people just so I'm not like transferring anything between each person. I've had classes, yeah, where people are like sobbing heavily and they don't leave the room, they just continue the practice. So you just have to know that that can happen and you can't be like, oh my God, are you okay? What's going on? You know what I mean? It's like, let them do it. Like, let them have their time. If it's something like, you know, people usually know like if they need to get out of there, but a lot of times you are creating a really powerful space that maybe they've never had ever in their life the opportunity to feel things and give permission to move through it, right? So, you know, you can also do things like use sage or Palo Santo, like incense is a nice way to clear, you know, after just cleaning up, doing a chant, like the 4 immeasurables chant that we've been learning this weekend is a good one. So there's all different things that you can do to kind of like avoid taking that with you or leaving it there for someone else, but also knowing that it's like, it's definitely like a possibility that it can happen where it feels like, oh, something very intense is going on here. And you just have to make sure that you are really strong, that you can contain that in some way for people. Like just not really like not like tell them what to do, but make sure they feel like they can do what they need to do in your presence. I think you have a lot of practice doing this.
And if someone's sobbing in your class, you can't go over and say something to them. But do you worry about how that might be affecting the students around that person? Because if I'm in a restorative class and the person next to me is sobbing and I notice it, I know myself, I worry that I'm going to teacher know, is everything okay? And then you say something in that moment to like let everybody else know that, not like, no person's crying, it's okay, but like something general.
Well, number one, you would, if you see someone sobbing, you would go to them and say, everything okay? Like just being very like even with it. You know what I'm saying? Not like alarmist or like, you know, don't let yourself, you know, you might worry about someone, but don't let them know that you're like super worried or anxious about it happening. And then you can make a general sort of vague comment to the room because maybe not everyone knows it. Maybe the next person to them knows it. And you can just say, you know, if you're feeling emotional or you're feeling things arise, just feel that happen, let it happen, know that you're safe. And if you need any assistance, I'm happy to come over. You know, you can like make some sort of general comment so people who know that it's happening are clear that you know that it's happening. But people who don't know that it's happening don't get all of a sudden unduly shocked or surprised.
And that's part of the cueing of the catch and redirect, catch and release. That's part of that. Always have tissues.
And you might do a disclaimer in the beginning of your class too, right? These are powerful practices. You may feel emotions arise. You may cry. You may feel angry. You may feel, you know, something else. Just know that it's okay to feel those things. It's not, you know, this is the purpose of this. Is to help you come into contact with what may be buried inside and help you to safely move through it so that you can progress on your path or your, you know, towards your goals or, you know, something like that. You can kind of say that in the beginning. I think so that might be helpful.
Do you have your own like everyday practice for yourself?
I do. It usually is a little more intuitive or a little more free-form than like a planned class because it's so personal to me. So it's like giving myself a private. And it does have to do with getting the spine in all four directions. Right now, because of my ankle, it's a lot of legs up. And it's a lot of breath work. A lot of breath work. I kind of hold poses until I feel like energetically I'm ready to move. So I don't always stay through a full song, or I don't always stay a full 20 minutes. Yesterday I was like in the same position for 40 minutes. So yeah, it's really good as a teacher to practice what you're going to teach, but then tailor it based on, who's in the room and what's happening. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Do you ever fall asleep in certain poses? I did that.
So that was a great question. So yes, I do fall. I've fallen asleep in a restorative class.
Mm-hmm.
So sleeping is different than restorative, right? Because restorative, we just went through like all the things that it is. Sleep is also important. If someone is always if someone falls asleep once, like totally fine. It's because you need it, right? That's why you're sleeping, is that you need to. If someone's falling asleep habitually, again, unless you know them, this might be the only place that they can fall asleep, right? Like maybe they're a new mom and they're just like exhausted. Like, who knows? Maybe they're a nurse and they have like a strange schedule. Like you just don't know. If someone's like snoring really loudly, I will go over and like make some type of noise so that they wake up, or maybe put my hand on them so that they wake up so they're not disturbing other people. But usually I do like to let them sleep. Yeah.
And it's really good for going to sleep. Like if you have trouble falling asleep, doing a couple of restorative poses before bed is really helpful.
Any other stuff? I feel like everyone's like excited to just do it. Okay, we'll just do it.
We had this nice weekend of art opening and Alexandra,
So because I know that you best openers a lot, I'm gonna focus a little less on that in order to balance you out a little bit. So just know that the order that I put things in and how I'm doing it is because I have that piece of information. Okay. All right. So everyone has a bolster, 2 blocks. Does everyone have 2 blankets or just 1 blanket? Just one blanket. That's fine. Okay. I need bathroom break. 5-minute break. I'm gonna put my stuff away. Allison, I just realized that my playlist is on my phone, and my phone.
Do you have a Spotify?
It is Spotify.
Okay, if you could share it with me, then I can put it on the speakers for you. Hey Jane, is it okay if I unplug the computer just for the last part?
Yeah, I think it should be charged well now.
It's 100%.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you guys want to stop and then restart for the restorative practice? Yeah, like the lecture and the asana? Thank you.
Aisle.
Yeah. So it's easy for you to
I thought
find.
she said we're doing asana. I'm like, really?
How did you share it?
Do you want me to message you?
I think I can just search for it to make it public. Okay, made it public.
Restorative, but I'll need it.
Oh, great, but then like, I'm again. It's like literally just called restorative. Oh my God, pick a different name.
Okay.
Sierra restorative. Unless it's that one.
Yeah. Yeah, called Restorative Sierra. Restorative Sierra.